And then it's almost time, so I'll go ahead and hit the publish button here. Hello everyone, and welcome to our Friday issue of Alex and Autos Live here. I'll pass that off to my lovely assistant there. So first off, let's talk about the videos that are coming up soon, because I had a lot of questions about that this week. First off, yes, we will be reviewing the Bmw X5. We'll have that in about 3 weeks or so expect that video review probably in about 4 weeks or perhaps 5 weeks. And be sure and follow us on Facebook.com so that way you can post questions about that while we actually have it. Also coming up, we have the Sierra AT4. That should be around Monday. Then Swan Song for the Toyota Sienna minivan, the Mercedes S-Class Coupe, the Infiniti QX80, Cadillac Escalade, another outgoing model basically, the Lincoln Nautilus, the artist formerly known as MKX, the Hyundai Elantra Sport, HR-V, Armada, Jetta, Leaf Plus, that's the long-range Leaf, the A220 Pacifica Hybrid, and Golf SE, just to name a few. There's actually quite a bit more on that list, but that's what we have at the moment. So with that out of the way, let's dive right into some of your initial questions here. The Jetta that we will be having soon is not the GLI, but we probably will have one this summer. So it's going to be a little bit until we can actually get into that particular model. Would I say a 2016-2017 Honda Accord Coupe V6 manual is a future collection car? I would somehow doubt it. The Coupe never sold in the numbers you'd probably need for a collector's car, but it sold in greater quantities than most collector cars out there. So I don't know about that, but I'm a bad prognosticator about future used cars. Let's see here, used 370Z or Genesis Coupe. I've always liked the 370. I would probably go with the Genesis Coupe, however. I think that the Genesis Coupe is just a better all-around used car than the 370. Let's see here, Prince is asking Prius or Prius Prime. I would tend to go with Prius, unless you live in a mountainous area, and then I would probably get the Prius Prime. The big advantage to the Prius Prime is its bigger battery pack. Depending on your exact situation, some of your operational costs might be lower. Actual fuel economy in the real world can also be higher in the Prius Prime if you are in those mountainous areas where you can actually take advantage of that regen braking all the way on down the hill. Someone's asking Prius or RAV4 hybrid. We haven't had a chance to drive the RAV4 hybrid for any long period of time. We drove it at the launch event. We have a complete video on it on the channel already. But the RAV4 hybrid, on paper at least, looks like a very good option. Almost 40 miles per gallon, likely in real-world driving. That's definitely not going to be as high as a Prius, but the RAV4 hybrid is definitely more functional and faster. So I would probably lead towards the RAV4 myself. So let's see here, moving along. Need the Audi Q3? Yes, don't we all? Don't know when that's going to happen yet, however, unfortunately. Let's see here. Can we review a 2019 Mazda 3 base sedan? We probably will not see the base sedan version of the Mazda 3. They're just generally not available in the fleet. We always talk about the differences, however, between the trim levels. So you notice that's something that we always go through. Do a review on the best base model sedan on the market. That is a tricky one because not everybody's base sedan lines up the same. The Mazda 3 base model really is more of a corollary to a lot of other manufacturers' mid-level trims, if you notice. The base model of the Hyundai Elantra, for instance, is significantly less expensive than the base model of Mazda 3. But we find a more attractive design, more attention to detail in the base model Mazda 3, slightly better materials inside the cabin, etc. So that's generally why base models are differently priced there. Moving along here, Hyundai Venue, any info? Not yet, but we should be seeing more in our crystal balls probably after New York would be my guess there. Any insight on the Ford Escape 2020? Not too much, really. I mean, we know quite a bit about the new Escape. It's going to be an all-turbocharged or hybrid lineup. It's going to be styled very sedan-like in their lineup. That was apparently deliberate. They've decided to make the Escape the car-like entry in the lineup, and then some, as of yet, unnamed SUV, which will probably be the Bronco returning, will be another small SUV in their lineup, slightly smaller than that, probably sort of Jeep Compass sized, and that will be styled more truck-like, sort of like the RAV4, the Jeep lineup, etc. So it seems like Ford is trying to have very car-like styled crossovers, as well as some more rugged styled crossovers in their lineup. And that's how that's going to be split there. Let's see here. When will we be reviewing the 2020 Kia Soul EV? That's a good question. I'm actually not sure. That particular event that I think you're speaking of kind of struck a lot of us as a surprise. There was a limited number of folks that were flown out to Korea, and it was a combination Hyundai and Kia event, which is very rare that the two brands actually work together that way. And so I suspect that we won't actually have our hands on it probably for another month or two. There may or may not be a separate drive event for the Soul EV. If there is, we will probably be invited to it once it's in America. If there is not a separate event for it, then we'll have to wait until we get it in the local press fleet to borrow, just like everybody else. There is a big, massive battery shortage going on in Korea right now, especially, and it's affecting the Korean brands especially hard right now. So, but also some of the Japanese EVs that are out there. And that's the big reason that the Kona is not very common on dealer lots. It's also the big reason that we don't have any pricing information on the Nero yet. So I'm not entirely clear why the Nero was launched so far ago, and then we still don't know how much it's going to cost or when it's going to be on sale. But once battery production ramps up in Korea, we will probably get better information on that. But expect supplies to be pretty limited all the way through probably until midsummer is going to be my guess for 2019. So the Soul may be quite late in comparison to the Nero. We'll see the Nero first, definitely, we're told. The Soul, they're telling us maybe July, but we don't know for sure in that window. Pardon me. When is the Hyundai Accent going to be redesigned? Are they going to bring back the hatchback? We don't have much data on the Accent yet. I expect that it will be redesigned soon, because we do have the Rio, which is the related Kia product. I don't think that they're going to be bringing the hatchback to America, however. In that particular segment, it seems like Hyundai is focused on the sedan format, and they're letting Kia take the other vehicles in that format. And then, of course, they have the Veloster, which is sort of a hatchback thing. So we don't know exactly when that's going to be. Mazda 3 2019 model year is nice, right? Yes, the Mazda 3 actually has a very premium interior for a base model, but that's also why it's considerably more expensive than really anything else in that segment. It's thousands of dollars more than a base Corolla or Honda Civic, and many thousands of dollars really more than the Elantra. What are my thoughts on the 2019 Maxima? I'm sad that the Maxima is not all-wheel drive. That's my big thought on that Maxima. I think that they have really missed an opportunity with that one. Let's see here. Will we be at the New York Auto Show? Yes, we will be. So that's coming up in 2 weeks. So next week I'm home, and then the week after that we fly to New York on Tuesday, and Wednesday, New York Auto Show coverage all day Wednesday, all day Thursday, and probably some dribbling in on Friday. Let's see here. Sienna or Sedona for long term? I would probably say Sedona in that matchup. The Sienna is just really old, as we'll cover in the video that's coming up next Wednesday. My big problem with the Sienna really is just its age. There's nothing really compelling about the Sienna. It's expensive, it's old. It has proved reliable, but the trouble with reliability in a way as a sole metric is that it disregards all the other factors in buying a vehicle, and one of them is operating expense. For instance, if you're shopping in that segment and you're looking for the lowest cost of operation, it would be the Pacifica Hybrid, because it's so much more efficient that it could break much more often and it wouldn't make a huge difference. So with that out of the way, let's move along here again, and we'll talk about one of the topics that I was talking about in the description here, which was newer is always better. If you haven't wandered over to Motor Trend and seen their article last week on 16 older performance cars that are slower than a Toyota Prius in their figure 8 test. Motor Trend has a figure 8 test where they literally drive a car around a track in sort of an infinity symbol there like that. And it is not a 0 to 60 test. This is handling and the ability to go around that figure 8. 2019 Toyota Prius beat a whole bunch of things in their test, which is amusing. The Mercedes-Benz CL65 AMG from 2005, 2004 Cadillac CTSV, 2013 Subaru BRZ, 2006 Dodge Charger SRT8, there's a Maserati Quattroporte in there, a Pontiac G8, a 2005 Bentley Continental GT, a 2006 stock BMW M5 was a hair slower in the figure 8, 2012 Mazda Miata, Ford Mustang Bullitt, Nissan 370Z, Bentley Mulsanne Speed. That was actually surprising because it's only a 2015, 2004 RX-8, Mazda Speed 3, Mercedes-Benz E63 AMG. Now, a lot of these are obviously probably going to be slower because of their overall weight, but a lot of them also logically because tires have simply gotten better over time. So one thing that I've always said to folks out there debating about new car versus old car is remember that back when your old car was brand new, the materials just weren't as good as they are now. Your car back in the 80s, back in the 70s, back in the 60s was not as safe, not as efficient, etc. versus a brand new car. Didn't handle as well either. This is one thing that we've been asked a great deal actually this last week was we've had a lot of customers come in, or sorry, a lot of viewers write in saying, I'm looking at a car for my teenager, I'm torn between buying them a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old Volvo or a brand new Honda Accord or something along those lines. Volvos are definitely very, very safe, and I would pit, I'm a multiple Volvo owner myself, I would pit a Volvo against most other cars any day of the week. But I would also say that that only really applies new to new. So if you're looking at a 10-year-old Volvo, for instance, it's going to be safe from that era, but it's not going to have the latest safety systems that we'll see on a modern Honda or Toyota or a modern Volvo for that matter. So I would say if you're shopping for a car and you're concerned about safety, make sure you can get the newest one you can afford and make sure you get all the active safety systems that you can afford as well. Autonomous braking systems may not be 100% accurate. They may not save you every time, but if they save you half the time, you're still ahead of the game. So that's my thought there on that front. So moving back here to some of these questions, let's see here. What do we think of the rumor that the S650 Mustang got pushed back to 2026? Is it going to be the same size as the Challenger? We don't know, but we do know that the Challenger is likely going to be shrinking in its next generation. That's all that we have heard. Rick is asking, what's the best manual you've ever shifted feeling-wise? That's a good question. And I don't know if I have a good answer for that. I would say it's probably going to be one of the BMW M models as far as rear-wheel drive manual transmissions go. Front-wheel drive transmissions, I tend to like the way that Honda's manual transmissions feel. I think that they're just a little bit more engaging as far as overall feel when it actually goes into gear. It has a more substantial feel than what we see out of Mazda, but Mazda's transmissions are also pretty good. Truck transmissions tend to be the worst, so if anybody's asking about the worst, that would probably be something along the lines of a manual Toyota Tacoma. It was pretty terrible. Anyway, moving along, we have Avalon, not a Nissan Maxima. I would agree there. Avalon I would probably get before Maxima, but I would also say that my problem with the Avalon is that you're not going to get that much more room than a Honda Accord or a Toyota Camry, so I would say before you even Avalon, I would say be sure and decide that you really don't want the Camry. If you're a Toyota person, if you're open to other brands, check out the Accord. Be sure to check out the Kia Cadenza. I think both of them are a step above the Avalon as far as overall value goes. The Avalon just is not as big as it once was compared to the Camry. That's my main complaint there. Would I rather have smooth lane keep assist or smooth radar cruise control? Definitely radar cruise control because I actually don't use lane keep assist, generally speaking. I live out in the country on winding mountain roads, and I always turn off every lane keeping feature when I'm driving out there. Sometimes if I'm on a long highway journey, I'll turn it back on just to make sure that I stay in my lane. But as far as daily commuting, I always have that particular system off. I love all the rest of them, but the lane keeping one is one that I do find a little annoying on some of those windier roads. Let's see here, about to buy a BMW X3. Is that a good choice? The X3, I've said this before about BMW, and this is something that offends some BMW fans, and for some reason does not offend BMW themselves. I think actually maybe quite logically. BMW is like the Honda of luxury brands, and I actually think that that is very high praise in my opinion, because BMW tends not to have the best in any segment. So the X3 I don't think is ostensibly the best crossover from a luxury standpoint, from a performance standpoint, from a handling standpoint. But what BMW really excels at is being very good in every metric. So they're not the best in every metric or necessarily any specific metric, but they're very, very well-rounded. And that's what I've always loved about BMW's products. So the X3 is not the best handling. That would be the Stelvio. It's not the fastest accelerating in its price category. It is not necessarily the most luxurious. I think the most luxurious in that segment right now would be the Volvo XC60 or the Mercedes. It's not necessarily the most reliable. It's not necessarily the most fuel efficient. It's not necessarily the biggest, etc. But when you look at all those various data points, it scores highly in all of those categories. So it's very, very well-rounded. And I think that's why BMW, generally speaking, sells so well, because that applies to all of their products. You know, the 3 Series is not necessarily the best in any particular metric, but it's very well-rounded. And it also applies to their performance vehicles, the M5, same sort of thing. It applies to their small crossovers, the BMW X1, BMW X2, etc. So that's my theory there around that. And that's why I would say BMW generally tends to be the safe option. So if you're torn and you're confused, you know, which one should I get? The safe choice is oftentimes the BMW. It may not be the most exciting, but it's definitely going to be a safe option. Moving along here. What do I think of Prius versus Nero? I actually would get the Nero over the Prius. I think it just has more character. I prefer the way the transmission shifts, etc., and I'm willing to give up the fuel economy to get that. Our neighbors were just making that choice recently, and they got the Nero as well. So scooting along here, 2017 Hyundai Elantra Sport with a 7-speed DCT. What do we think of the long-term reliability of Hyundai's DCTs? We don't have any evidence to suggest that they won't be reliable. Hyundai does put a long warranty on all of them. And I think the big deal here with Hyundai's DCTs is that they're a dry clutch design. They're not a wet clutch. So we don't seem to have the same sort of fluid degradation concerns and contamination concerns that we see in wet clutch, dual clutch designs. For instance, if you're looking at an Audi dual clutch design, they're much smoother than the Hyundais, but they require fluid changes every 40,000 miles. And there is some concern that the reason that those fluid changes are required is because the clutch material gets into the oil and it can cause wear on the gear sets over time, etc. So you're much less likely to have that sort of concern in a dual clutch transmission that has a dry clutch, because it's never going to be interacting with the fluid. So that's my big thought there. I wouldn't have any particular qualms with that. As I've said before, I would get the 7-speed dual clutch on the Elantra Sport as well. I like the manual. We're driving it actually this week. I like the manual, but I have to say that I would probably get the dual clutch because it's faster 0 to 60. It's actually a pretty good dual clutch overall, and the fuel economy is absolutely excellent with that transmission. So let's see here, moving along. Mazda 3 has very little room inside. That is one of my complaints. Mazda 3 is a little tight. What would you recommend a new car to lease under $200 or $250 a month? That's a really low lease price. There's not going to be a lot down there because a lot of inexpensive vehicles don't actually lease that well because they may depreciate rather rapidly. So you're either looking at very, very inexpensive vehicles, or you'd be looking at something like an EV that might have a subsidized lease rate. I would say if you want to keep your payments that low, you might want to look at a lightly loved pre-owned, certified pre-owned mainstream vehicle. Something like a certified pre-owned Honda Civic would probably have a loan rate that is down there in that range. So that's my thought there. I too have a deposit on the Rivian. Lots to worry about on that product, charging network, long-term dealer support, etc. Charging network is not really a problem there because remember the Rivian, I think you're thinking of this post right here, the Rivian uses the same DC charge port as basically every other EV out there except Tesla and the Leaf. And at this point in time, there are more SAE combo charge ports in the US than there are Tesla supercharger ports. And there are also more CHAdeMO ports, but the big push has been on that SAE combo connector. And so all the manufacturers are supporting that one. We're seeing huge growth in that particular network, or that particular plug, because there's really no network behind it. But as I've said before, the one problem with that is Tesla has been really good at locating their chargers. So if you look at I'm going to see how bad my drawing skills are here. But if you see a network or a drawing of the United States, it's a very bad drawing, and you're in Seattle and you want to go to New York, which is kind of over here-ish, and Maine's sticking up there. Anyway, so if you want to go to New York in your Tesla, you can drive across 80, 90, etc., and you can go across that way. If you wanted to do this in a Jaguar I-Pace or an e-tron or a Rivian or a Kona or any other EV out there, you'd have to drop down to Denver, that's probably right around there, Denver, and then tootle along that way, because there are no SAE combo or CHAdeMO fast charge stations in some of these states across the top. So number of charging stations is not the key win for the Tesla charging network or the Tesla charging connector. It's location, location, location. Because in the Bay Area, for instance, there are hundreds and thousands more SAE fast charge connectors and CHAdeMO connectors combined than Tesla supercharger connectors. The trouble is location. They're scattered everywhere. They're not planned with some sort of master plan going on. And the master plan is what we see at Tesla. So that's the big thing there. But as electric vehicles become more prevalent, we may see more of those charge stations across those northern states and those the plains states, things like that. The big problem with those seems to be they're going to be unprofitable. So Tesla, I'm sure, loses money on those charging stations that are out there in the middle of nowhere. And that's not something that a for-profit charging network would generally do unless they're supported by a vehicle manufacturer to make that happen. Let's put it that way. So let's see here. Moving along, Outback or Forester. I would get the Forester because it's newer, but then I would also keep my eye open for the new Outback, which should be coming along here very, very soon. Let's see here. Why does the new Kia Soul not have cruise control, but the new 2019 Kia Forte LX does? Remember that the Kia Soul is in a different category. The Kia Soul is a subcompact vehicle. Forte is a compact. So Forte is competing with Civic and Corolla, and those have cruise control. And the Soul, however, is competing with things like the Rio, the Yaris, etc. So it's a very different kind of set. And in that category, it's much more common to not have cruise control in your base model. Let's see here. Do you recommend a CPO 2015 Tesla Model S 85D or the 2019 Model 3 dual motor option? That's a tricky one. The Model S is going to be bigger, so this is the eternal question. Do you buy a new car? I think this is agnostic to Tesla. Do you buy the newer, smaller car, or do you buy the bigger, older car? You're going to have more problems, generally speaking, long-term with the older car because it's older than the newer car. And so that's just something that's more of a personal preference, I would say. If it were me, I would probably get the newer car. But then the Model S is more comfortable. So again, something of a personal preference there. What do we think of the Kia Sportage? The Sportage, I think, hasn't aged as well as I thought it should. The Sportage is a little on the small side in that segment. The SX, I think, is unique because it has the turbocharged engine. But if you're just looking at the regular naturally aspirated engine in the Sportage, then I think there's some better options. It does have the advantage of long warranty, and if styling is something that you're interested in, that should be fine. Reliability is not a problem with the Sportage. It's been very reliable. Handling is good. But when you look at the whole package and what you're getting for value, I think that the Honda CR-V is a better value overall than that. The Mazda CX-5 is better looking. The Toyota RAV4 is the safe option. There's a hybrid thing in there. So I would say that wrapping that all together, that they're just better options out there than the Sportage at the moment. So moving along here. Someone is 6'5", looking for a mid-sized truck with modern safety features and a crew cab. Which would you choose? Honestly, if you're looking for, depends on how much truck you're looking for, I guess. If you're looking for something that is going to be very good on-road, safe, reliable, practical, Honda Ridgeline would be my go-to truck in that segment. The cab is actually very, very generously sized in the Ridgeline compared to especially the Toyota Tacoma. The Tacoma would be my least favorite in that segment. The cab is very, very small in the Tacoma. And the big problem is the overall shape. So every time I'm sitting in a Tacoma, I always feel like I'm driving like this with my feet practically out in front of me sitting on the floor because the cab is so short. And since they haven't really redesigned the Tacoma in a long time, the cab still has that same shape even in the recently refreshed one. Comfort, especially for larger people, is going to be much better in the Colorado, the Ranger, the Gladiator, the Ridgeline, etc. And which of those best fits your needs, I would say depends on exactly what you're after. So the Ranger is going to be a really good all-around, more rugged truck. It's going to tow more than the Ridgeline. It's going to haul more than the Ridgeline. The Ridgeline is going to be a little bit more practical as far as on-road driving dynamics. The cargo bed in the back, the way that it has that trunk back there, etc. So those would be my recommendations there. So let's see here, moving along. Why is the Ntsb investigating certain Hyundai Kia models due to fires? Wasn't aware of any problems. This has been actually well advertised. It appears that in certain years of certain Hyundai and Kia vehicles, there's been a slightly higher rate of fires in those vehicles. So when the Ntsb is talking about vehicles catching on fire in those statistics, there's always a certain percentage of cars that catch on fire. And the Hyundai Kia vehicles, I believe, were 70%. Some of these vehicles were 70% higher than the next in line. Now, keeping in mind that this is like, 0.5% versus, 0.7% of the cars out there that catch on fire, that sort of thing. So it's not a huge number of cars. It's still a very, very small number of cars, but statistically, it was higher than another category, and no one really knows exactly what's going on there. So hopefully we will find out when the Ntsb releases their findings. But at this moment in time, because of the relatively small number involved, I wouldn't really have a problem getting them or recommending them. But if that's something that is a concern, then I would say avoid them at the moment until that finding is out, or avoid the engine types and models that are being investigated. Let's see here. What car has the most comfortable seats, front and rear, for someone with back problems? I would say, generally speaking, brand-wise, Nissan does very well in the mainstream category, and in the luxury category, Volvo is definitely the go-to with the seat designs there, especially the upper-end trims in the Volvo lineup. Generally speaking, I would say look for seats that have a four-way adjustable lumbar support, extending thigh cushions. Those sorts of things will definitely make it more easy to find an ideal driving position. And then in the luxury categories, I would also look for seats that offer seat back curvature adjustment. That's something that we find in some of the BMW and Mercedes models. That will definitely make it a little easier there. Tiguan SEL versus Forester Touring, pros, cons. The big problem with the Forester Touring, I would say, and really my only complaint with that, would be upper end trims don't feel as premium as upper end trims of the competition. So if you look at the interior, fit and finish, etc., materials quality and top end trims of the Forester Touring that you're talking about, versus the Tiguan, I actually think the Honda CR-V, Mazda CX-5, etc., I think those have more premium feeling interiors than we see in the Forester Touring. The Forester does very well in the lower and mid-range trims, but those upper-end trims, I think that falls apart a little bit. Let's see here. Base RAV4 gas, RAV4 hybrid, or base 2019 Forester. If you're interested in all-wheel drive at all, base Forester is a really good value. I would then say if you're looking at RAV4, especially if you're willing to move up into the RAV4 hybrid, that's going to give you excellent fuel economy. So long-term cost of operation, dependability, reliability, etc. The RAV4 hybrid is definitely going to beat the Forester for sure, and it's also going to beat the base RAV4 gas. So Toyota's hybrid systems are very, very reliable, generally speaking, because there's very little to go wrong. Something that a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of modern hybrid designs are actually very simple compared to gasoline engines. So the hybrid system that Toyota uses is a planetary gear set power split system. So pardon me because my exact connections here are not exact here, but basically there's a sun gear, there are planet gears that interact around here. Let's say 4 of them. And then these are connected via a carrier. So there's a mechanical input to the carrier that holds these 4 gears as they spin around. And then there's a ring gear around the outside. Toyota, Fiat Chrysler, General Motors, Ford, and I'm missing a few here, the Subaru plug-in hybrid system. A lot of different hybrid systems use this same basic arrangement. And the exact connections vary, but this is basically the theme going on. So the ring gear, for instance, here connects to the wheels on the car. That's what drives the car forward. And then it also connects to one of the motor units. So there's a motor actually here too. Then we have the internal combustion engine, which could be connected either to the gear in the middle, the sun gear, or it could be connected to this planetary carrier here. So we'll say this is the engine. We'll call that ICE. And then this would be another motor. We'll call that MG, whatever, MG1, and this would be MG2. And this is all that there is inside a Toyota hybrid system. When you compare this to Toyota's 8-speed automatic transmission, there are multiple planetary gear sets. There's going to be a dog clutch just so that you can put it in reverse. There's going to be a parking pawl. There's going to be all sorts of other stuff going on. And this transmission is just simpler. There's a little parking gear that will engage a little parking pawl to lock it into place. But that's it. There's no clutches, no bands, no nothing going on in the Toyota system. If you want to go backwards, it simply uses the motor to rotate this motor in reverse. If it wants to go forward, the motor helps that go forward. The internal combustion engine and these 2 motors work together to move everything forward. And that's how the hybrid system works. So it's very, very mechanically simple. And then all of the related solid-state control systems are generally very reliable because electronics are reliable in that method. And battery systems actually are honestly pretty reliable as well. So if you're looking at overall reliability, modern hybrids are quite reliable. That's also why the Pacifica hybrid actually appears to be a future projections indicate that it should be very reliable. There were some initial control system concerns, but the actual mechanics of the hybrid system actually are the same design that we find in a Prius. And in fact, the hybrid system itself appears to be built by Aisin, which is majority controlled by Toyota. So I wouldn't have any particular worries there. Let's see here. Why does the Dodge Durango tow so much more than its competitors? It's all just about vehicle design with the Durango. So rear-wheel drive means that it can have a rear-wheel drive transmission. Inherently, rear-wheel drive transmissions have more ability to cool themselves. They can accommodate bigger gear sets because the case is physically larger. There's just more room, more powerful engine, and then just the chassis itself, the unibody of the Durango was designed with towing in mind. It's possible to design a rear-wheel drive vehicle without towing in mind, for instance, without towing heavy weights. So the Ford Explorer, for instance, is not rated to tow the same kind of weights that we see in the Durango. The difference there in the Ford Explorer is most likely the rear suspension design, the overall payload rating of the vehicle, and possibly some of the unibody, underbody designs, the rails that would connect the front suspension, rear suspension together, etc. It's most likely it. The Durango just overall has a slightly different variation there. Stelvio 2018, good reliability. It would depend on what you define as good. Stelvio probably not pinnacle of reliability. If you're looking for reliability, you would want to look at RDX, NX, that sort of thing. Stelvio is most likely going to be towards the bottom end of that reliability pyramid. Let's see here, M5 versus Stelvio Quadrifoglio. Stelvio is a ton of fun, but I would M5 because the Quadrifoglio might be broken a lot. Let's see here. What institution do you think issues the best reliability data? I think all of the reliability data has their holes in all of these reliability metrics, but I would say once you understand the pros and cons to their reliability research methods, then any of them will be just fine, but they're not going to be the be-all, end-all of anything. So I like True Delta, Consumer Reports, J.D. Power, they all have their pros and cons, but True Delta is going to give you the numbers soonest. They're going to have the smallest data sets because they're a small outlet. Consumer Reports is going to have big data sets as well as J.D. Power compared to them. Consumer Reports is going to take a slightly more holistic look than J.D. Power. J.D. Power their vehicle dependability studies factor in some strange things that I dislike. You know, infotainment, ease of use, etc., is somehow a reliability metric. Don't know why that is, but that factors into their numbers as well. Let's see here. Douglas is asking, do you still loving your Durango? Do you still recommend Durangos? As I've said before with the Durango, it's important to remember that there are definitely reasons to buy certain vehicles and segments. So for Durango, the big selling point is the tow rating of the Durango. If you want a V8, if you want rear-wheel drive, if you want a high towing ability, the Durango is the only entry in that segment at the moment. Soon there will be the Explorer, and if you want rear-wheel drive dynamics and sportier handling, I would be willing to bet that the Explorer is going to be the better handling option than the Durango. The Durango is old, it's a little bit heavy, it's also a little bit big, and the rear end is somewhat soft, so it's not the sportiest entry necessarily. But it tows really, really quite well. Not as family friendly as something like the Atlas or the CX-9 even. Its overall interior space is not as space efficient as we see in something like a Telluride or the Palisade, and it doesn't seat 8. So my version seats 6, for instance. So it's not really horribly practical for big families either, but it does that one thing really, really well. So if that's what you're looking for, then yes, I would wholeheartedly recommend it. It drives nicely. We haven't had any reliability problems. It's surprisingly efficient for a V8 crossover. It's definitely more efficient than a Tahoe or a Yukon, etc. And I would buy the Durango over a Tahoe or a Yukon. The Durango actually tows more than either of those options. Overall performance is as good as the 6.2-liter engine available in those vehicles. And overall, I think it's just a better sorted package. The only downside is when you are towing with it, and we do tow a lot, the fact that it's a unibody vehicle, it's going to be louder when towing. The tow hitch receiver, the ball, they all rattle on any tow vehicle. And because they're rattling in the same piece of metal that you're sitting in, it's going to be louder. It's going to be like sitting inside a drum in that way. A body-on-frame vehicle has more isolation. The trailer is actually connected to the frame. You're sitting inside the body, and the body and frame are actually isolated from one another. They're not directly connected. So it's going to be a little bit quieter inside a Tahoe or a Yukon, but they're actually not going to tow as much as a Durango, which is interesting. So moving along here, let's see, what's the cheapest new car I could buy with side curtain airbags? Most cars actually these days will, generally speaking, have side curtain airbags in order to meet side impact tests. So I would be willing to bet that you're going to be looking at things like the Yaris, the Rio, the Soul has side curtain airbags. Something along those lines are going to be the cheapest there. Let's see here. What about the new Chevy Suburban Tahoe? I saw the spy shots, hoping that it will have the same, won't have the same front end as Silverado. Probably not, but it's going to be similar to the look. It's going to have a very, a look that's in common theme with the brand. But I do like the look of the new Suburban and Silverado. They do look good. My collar's a little funny. I'm being told my collar's funny here. Sorry. They do look good. I'm really interested in the suspension dynamics, because one thing that I will say about the Suburban and Tahoe, they may not be space efficient, but they actually have aged very well. The Tahoe Suburban, for their size, for what they are, they actually handle relatively well. So the improvements that should come from the independent rear suspension, the possible transmission improvements, etc., I'm really excited to see how that goes. And GM has also done a good job at lightweighting their vehicles without going to things like aluminum. So by all accounts, the new Suburban and new Tahoe might actually be lighter than the Ford Expedition, than the Lincoln Navigator, and could be less expensive to maintain long-term. So I'm really interested to see how that goes. Which car manufacturer has the best safety features? If we're thinking holistic best safety features, then you're going to be looking at the European options. So Mercedes and Volvo would be the two. They're going to have the most advanced, coolest, newest safety features in all of their vehicles. Volvo's going to be the only one with big animal detection. They have the steering avoidance, which we're starting to see now on some Lincoln products, but they were the ones that launched it. Mercedes generally has some of the more advanced safety features in regards to like heads-up displays, pedestrian detection systems that will have the headlights shine a light at the pedestrians on the side of the road, so that way it makes sure that you know where they are, that sort of thing. So luxury car manufacturers are going to have those more advanced safety features. In the mainstream segment, actually, Honda and Toyota have done an excellent job at bringing their latest safety features down to even base trims of their models. So as far as safety proliferation and biggest impact, I would actually say Honda and Toyota are going to have the biggest impact in overall on-road safety, which is actually something that I was surprised and really happy with. So Toyota recently, in the last few years, has said that they want all of their vehicles to have their safety suites on them, and I think that there's only one vehicle in their lineup left that doesn't, perhaps maybe two, but at this point for 2019, 2020, you buy a Corolla, you buy a Yaris, they're going to have autonomous braking, etc. That's going to have the biggest impact on overall on-the-road safety, I think. Let's see here, Mazda 6 or Mazda CX-5. I would CX-5. It's going to be a little bit more practical overall. If your kids are in rear-facing child seats, then depending on exactly what child seat you're looking at and the size of everybody involved, the Mazda 6 might have a little bit more room for a rear-facing seat. But if everybody is in forward-facing seats, I would CX-5. Moving along here, would you recommend the 2019 Mazda 3? It's gorgeous, so I would say yes, with some caveats. If you're looking for absolute best performance or best grip, then no. But if you're looking for a stylish vehicle that is going to be fun to drive, then yes, I would definitely get it. I really like the minimalist design of the interior, the premium features that we see in that vehicle. But as we see in some near luxury cars, it's not necessarily going to be the better performing one. So a Mazda 3 is not going to actually grip the road as well as some trims of Civic or the Elantra Sport or the new Forte GT. Or even top-end trims of the outgoing Ford Focus. But I think it's going to be more stylish than all of those other options. So I think that was it'd be a good reason to get one. Mercedes GLE, we are still working on that one, so hopefully that will be coming up soon. What do we think of the XC60 T8 plug-in hybrid? I like the plug-in hybrid version of the XC60, but it depends on what you're expecting from your vehicle. The T8 marches to a very different drummer. It is surprisingly quick. In our testing, it beats the X3M, it beats the SQ5, actually by quite a long shot. And it really ties with that GLC 43 AMG. But it feels very different than all of them. There's torque steer at the same time that you're going incredibly quick. You have that electric mode, you have reasonably good fuel efficiency, you have the tax credits, so overall value is actually quite high. You have the nicest interior in the segment, but it's definitely a sort of a highs and lows vehicle. Reliability may not be quite where the rest of the competition is, but acceleration is excellent. Handling isn't where the rest of the competition is, but fuel economy is excellent. The interior is very well done. We have those massaging seats available, etc. So it's a high and low thing. But if I were shopping in that segment, it would probably be one of my top choices. I would say Stelvio for the overall performance and handling feel, the XC60 for its luxury feel and fuel economy, and the Acura RDX for overall value and expected reliability. So let's see here. Someone's questioning asking about BMW reliability. BMW reliability has actually been quite good. If you take a look at a lot of the ratings out there, BMW suffers in things like J.D. Power reliability ratings because the infotainment system is hard to use, and hard to use actually can drop your reliability score there. Depending on the overall vehicle that you're looking at, the overall segment, sometimes it will be lowered because of other sideways things that are not directly reliability-related functions. But overall reliability is not as high as Lexus, but it's not as low as Alpha, if that makes sense. So, moving along here, does the 2020 Explorer still have a usable third row? It appears to be very good. We don't know exactly how usable till we get our hands on it, but it should be, it's looking like above average in that segment is what I would go with. Can you recommend a used sporty car under $20,000? Ooh, that's a pretty narrow price range there. I would probably end up sticking with something like a Volkswagen Golf GTI could be in that price range. That would be fun. You could probably get yourself something like a Mustang or Camaro, actually, that would be a good fun option, relatively recent in there as well. Let's see, Hyundai Ioniq or new Corolla Hybrid. I would Ioniq, to be perfectly honest. The Corolla Hybrid I was a little bit disappointed in. It's very limited in scope, so you can only get it in that one trim level. If you want any more premium features, you're not going to find them in the Corolla. Toyota really wants you to move up into the Prius to get those features. The Ioniq is also just more practical. It has a much bigger cargo area, it's more comfortable inside, and it actually handles better than the Corolla as well. The one thing to note is that real-world fuel economy numbers in the Ioniq are likely going to be below EPA, whereas the Corolla, they're likely going to be at or above, just due to the overall design. The Ioniq is still going to be very fuel efficient, but it may not be as fuel efficient as some of those alternatives out there like a Prius. So what are our thoughts on the Continental Black Label since it no longer offers the 400 horsepower twin-turbo V6? The Continental has always honestly been a disappointment to me. The biggest reason is the overall performance level. Even though it claimed to have 400 horsepower, the performance figures were never there because torque and horsepower had to be so limited in those lower end gears in order to save the transmission from shredding itself apart. And rear seat room in the Continental is not great. Legroom is okay, but rear seat headroom is pretty poor. I can't actually sit upright in the rear seat of a Continental, which I think is a big problem because I can in a 7 Series or an A8 or an S-Class or a Chrysler 300 or a Kia K900 or even a Genesis G80, and that's a problem. I like the design, I like the look of the Continental, but the functionality is just not there. Also, the materials quality in the back of the Continental just isn't really quite my taste, and the price tag is a little on the high side. So, personally, I think Continental is sort of dead man walking. I can't think of a really good reason that if you're shopping in that segment to get the Continental over a Nautilus or over a Navigator. Especially if you're shopping for a black label Continental, I would just get the Navigator. The Navigator is gorgeous inside, outside, etc. It doesn't have any of those problems. Or the Aviator. The Aviator, I think, is going to be a big problem for the Continental as well because it may be a little closer in terms of its overall price range. But again, I can't think of a single good reason to buy the Continental over the upcoming Aviator. So let's see here. Are Volkswagen DSGs reliable? How can we maintain them? Be sure and change your fluid regularly on Volkswagen's DSGs. Now there are some, I'm not sure which DSG you're speaking of, but there are some Volkswagen DSGs in other markets around the world that are dry clutch. Those are likely going to be more reliable than the wet clutch versions. Wet clutch versions have had some reliability issues in the early editions, but modern ones, the big concern is going to be that regular fluid change, which can be expensive compared to some of the other transmissions out there. Let's see here. I really like the new series that we started in the videos. Thank you for that. Would you get the Ford Expedition over the Dodge Durango? I tend to tow a bit and need at least 6 seats. So Jay, that depends on what you're looking for. The Ford Expedition definitely is bigger than the Durango, and it's going to be a little bit harder to park. I like the interior, and I like the overall cargo room that we have inside and the ability to seat more people. But I have to say that if I were in that segment right now, I would probably get the Durango over the Expedition. It's going to be cheaper. That's a big factor. The Expedition is definitely more expensive. The Durango, you could get the 5.7-liter V8 and tow about what you can in the Expedition, about 7,500 pounds, have 6 seats or 7 seats, depending on the version that you get. And have some interior finishes that I think are nicer. So for instance, if you get the Citadel, you'll get the leather dashboard for a lot less than you'll find those premium touches in the Ford product line. You'll get a lot of the modern features. You can get the trailer brake controller integrated now finally. And if you're interested in more power, you can actually get the SRT version of the Durango for about the same price as those Expedition models, and you'll be able to tow even more. So I would say it depends on what you're looking for there. Basically, it's more for your dollar on the Durango. It's not as modern and it's not quite as flashy looking. I think as trendy looking on the outside. Doesn't have quite as much cargo room, but it is going to be easier to park and it's still going to tow those heavy loads there. Prince is asking, what is the best small SUV right now? I would say it depends on whether you're looking for something that's more off-road ability or on-road ability, but my top picks right now in the compact crossover segment would be probably RAV4, CR-V, Forester, and the turbocharged CX-5, depending on exactly what you're looking for there. Those would be my top picks there. Will the Soul ever go 4x4? It's not looking likely at this moment. Remember that going all-wheel drive is going to seriously reduce your overall fuel economy. The only big push that we may see in the Soul that may get us there would be a mild hybrid system, perhaps a plug-in hybrid system. If they put an electric motor in the back, as they have teased over time, then we may get some all-wheel drive ability, but I don't think that we're ever going to see a traditional four-wheel drive system or all-wheel drive system in that. Let's see here. Moving along here. Why does Scotty Kilmore hate on Hyundais and Kia so much when they're better than Mazdas and Nissan? I don't have any explanation for that. I will let everybody figure that out on their own. Let's see here. Moving along here. Will our Model 3 be better than Roman's Model 3? I don't know if our Model 3 ever appears, and at that point I guess we should cover the Model 3 here. So our Model 3 was ordered 5 weeks ago yesterday, and 2 weeks ago we got a notification that it would be delivered on the 29th of last month, and then at some point or another, about a week into that delivery date, the delivery date got removed and we no longer have a delivery date. There have been a lot of rumors swirling around this, and none of them, we don't have any confirmation on any of them, let's put it that way. One rumor was that Tesla had failed to actually create a standard range battery, and so that they were going to just software limit their existing mid-range battery down there. We don't know whether that is true or not. It makes sense on the one hand because they'd be able to upsell you the extra range later, but on the other hand, it doesn't make sense because if few people ever selected that option, then it would be a lot less profitable. And there are already grave concerns about Model 3 base model profitability. I know that there have been a lot of references back to this Munro article about profitability on the Model 3. Not sure I believe that to be truthful, because when you look at Tesla's financial statements, it does not appear that the Model 3 is going to be profitable from an ongoing operation standpoint in that base model. I have troubles really believing that. There are also some other reasons that I really can't go into from an NDA perspective why I'm not really clear on the base model profitability angle. But we ordered that base model, and part of that cheapening down there to achieve that price was manual seats, cloth seats, and a quote-unquote standard interior. The other rumor out of Tesla has been that we don't know what the standard interior looks like. Is it real? Has it been created yet? We don't know. Have they simply taken the plastics that are slush molded and made hard injection molded versions of them? We don't know that either. We do know that the next step up is actually quite a big bump for 20 miles of range, a minor performance improvement, an extra speaker, and that's a power seat. So that bump up into that next standard range plus is actually a pretty big leap. And that's the most likely reason that we're seeing that standard range plus model. That does appear to be a software reduced battery. So they'd be able to upsell you the bigger battery range later. That makes the most sense. But this base model, we're not sure yet. It may be that we won't see it until June or July, the rumor mill is saying now. And some folks were actually saying that it may be as late as fall 2019. So we don't know. Let's see here. Moving along, when will Lexus refresh the Lexus NX? We don't really know that one. Lexus does tend to have very long shelf lives for their products, so if we aren't seeing any rumors on that yet, it's probably going to be at least a year until we start seeing those mules coming out. I'm actually surprised Lexus has let some of their product line languish a bit here. So the NX was out in 2016. It's actually not very old, generally speaking. So we may not see another one for another, let's see here, say 2 years, 3 years at least on the standard luxury cycle. We may see another refresh, another minor refresh, and then finally the model out there. What manual shift sedan hatch under $30,000 do you recommend? If you can get past its looks, which are controversial, I would say Civic. Corolla hatch actually is quite fun, and I do love the feature functionality in that hatch. You can still get radar adaptive cruise control, in the Corolla. And a really nice touch is that as you're shifting, the radar adaptive cruise control does not cancel as it does in most vehicles with radar adaptive cruise control and a manual transmission. Most vehicles, when you put the clutch in, cruise control actually cancels itself. In the Corolla, it just pauses, and then the moment you're in the next gear, it actually picks back up again. So if you're climbing the Continental Divide or a hill or whatever, and you want to use that radar adaptive functionality on those long interstates with uphills and downhills, you can shift up and down as needed, and that radar functionality will still continue in the Civic, which is actually a function that I really appreciate. Impreza, I'm not a huge fan of the manual transmission or the overall functionality set that we find in that manual transmission Impreza. I would probably get the Mazda 3 before I got that one. Let's see here, moving along. Not a huge fan of the looks of the Ford Escape. Not clear on that one, but I do like the interior. If you're wondering about that. Let's see here. Someone's moving from Southern California to Minnesota. Drive a 2015. What type of winter tire should I get? I would say the best thing to do with winter tires is at the beginning of every season, check out Tire Rack. They have regular reviews of the latest winter tires, and then you can make your decision from there. I really like the way that they do their tire testing. They have back-to-back testing that a lot of outlets can't afford to do. So I would put their reviews over mainstream outlets like Car and Driver, Motor Trend, etc., because they actually have access to more tires than a lot of those other outlets there. So I would definitely look there. Let's see here. Someone loves the A-List series. Please continue it. Thanks for that. I'm glad that someone has been watching that one. So we're definitely going to be trying to keep that up as well. What are non-luxury cars with 360 cameras? Generally speaking, a lot of the top-end trims of the Asian models especially will have 360-degree cameras, and a lot of pickup trucks have 360-degree cameras now too, which is very, very handy. So those are what you should look at there. Let's see here. What are our thoughts on the new hybrid Jeep Renegade? I'm really intrigued to see what hybrid system is actually under the hood there. So from the technology aspect, I'm really interested to see what is going to be under there. And aside from that, FCA definitely needs it. That's my thought there, because their fuel economy ratings overall are definitely low. They need to bring them up, so that's one way that they're going to do that. What are our thoughts on Chevy's new upcoming cars? We don't have too much on Chevy's future vehicles because they don't really have cars per se coming up very much here. But we recently reviewed the Blazer. That was actually very promising. We probably will be seeing some tweaks to their existing models. If you like the style, then I don't see any problem with them. The only thing that I can say about the Blazer, and this actually applies to the Equinox as well, is Chevy's MSRP pricing is, I think, a little bit high. So the Blazer I really liked until I saw the price tag. It handles well. I actually think it looks good. The interior is definitely better, in my opinion, than the interior that we find in the Honda Passport, but the price tag is a little steep. Now, the reality is the Chevy is going to be selling likely a lot lower versus MSRP than the Honda, but initially, those dealers are going to be selling right at MSRP, and so the deal is the problem, at least for the first year. Let's see here. Are Kia and Hyundai reliable nowadays? Are they the same level as Toyota? That is a good question. Depending on which reliability metric you look at, Kia and Hyundai have actually beat Toyota. It's a little hard to tell long-term what that will be. When we look at long-term reliability metrics now, Hyundai and Kia are a little bit behind Toyota and Honda, but we're talking about models that were built 5 or 6 years ago, and those are different models than we have now. So when we look at the progression of reliability metrics, I would say a car purchased today, I would have no qualms putting Hyundai and Kia right there in line with Honda and Toyota in terms of long-term dependability and long-term reliability when comparing apples to apples. So naturally aspirated Toyota, naturally aspirated Kia or Hyundai, definitely very equal. Long-term metrics, turbocharged Hyundai, turbocharged Kia, probably slightly below a naturally aspirated Toyota, because anytime you're adding more feature functionality, you're going to insert the possibility of unreliability. So turbocharged engines, generally speaking, are not going to be as reliable as a naturally aspirated engine, but still very reliable in the grand scheme of things. We've definitely seen a massive improvement in reliability from those Korean brands. The trajectory is what I think has been interesting, and the speed at which they've gone from truly terrible to solid options to top picks in some segments is astonishing. So 10 years ago, I probably would not have recommended a Kia to many people unless you were looking for something that was really, really inexpensive. And then flashback to 5 years ago, where there were solid reasons to buy the Kia. They weren't quite where everybody else was in terms of styling or features, but they were making good choices. You know, the Kia Sorento from 5 years ago was not the most attractive entry, but it wasn't hideous. It wasn't the most efficient, but it wasn't terrible. Interior parts quality wasn't great, but it was pretty good for the price tag. And the price tag was very low, so there's good reason to buy it. And then fast forward to now, where we see entries like the Stinger, I would say the Cadenza, the new Telluride, to some extent the current Sorento, but the Sorento is getting a little older. It's due for a refresh or replacement here soon. Definitely the Forte, etc. Definitely solid reasons to buy the Kia over the competition. And those actually now include reliability, dependability, performance, etc. So the speed at which that's happened is astonishing because we haven't seen that before. We've seen American brands like Jeep, Chrysler, Ford, Chevy, Lincoln, etc. that have really improved their overall product over time. Reliability in the mainline American brands, Chevy, Dodge, Ford, their reliability metrics have improved drastically over the last 20 or 30 years. But the delta between them and the top manufacturers, it may have shrunk, but they haven't shot past them, if that makes sense. So when we look at Chevy reliability, for instance, steady uphill trajectory, but the steady uphill trajectory that we've seen from Toyota has matched it in terms of overall reliability. So Chevy, the delta between Chevy and Toyota is shrinking over time, but it doesn't look like they're going to shoot past, if that makes sense. Whereas Hyundai and Kia, the trajectory does appear that that is possible. Anyway, moving along here. Thoughts on a potential FCA Hyundai merger? I'll believe that when I see it. I'm not quite clear what Hyundai gets out of the deal there. So we'll see. Which German car is my favorite at the moment? I would say that depends on what you're after. I really like both Mercedes and BMW. I would say that Audi is probably a close third there. I like Audi's styling, but when it comes to driving dynamics, Audi does fall behind BMW and Mercedes because of the engine placement. And I would say that that's important when you're looking at especially high performance models. Like there are good reasons to buy an S or an RS trim of an Audi. Performance, I love all-wheel drive, strong reason to buy those products. But if you're after that handling precision, the ultimate in feel in those segments, I wouldn't put those products at the top of the list. I would say the others get a slight nudge. I would say BMW for the well-roundedness. BMW is not necessarily the ultimate driving machine, but they are the ultimate well-rounded machine. Decent value overall, etc. And then Mercedes, I think, has really turned over a new leaf in the 2000s, maybe say 10 years ago. I really didn't understand why you would buy the Mercedes over some of the Audi or BMW options. The interiors lagged behind, but Mercedes has decided to really reinforce their premium positioning. So you see the Mercedes products that compete with the BMW products. The Mercedes are going to be more expensive, generally speaking. And I think that it is now warranted because we get better quality materials, better quality interiors, etc. Let's see here. Moving along here. Insight or Accord Hybrid? I would probably Accord Hybrid. I think it's just more comfortable on the inside, and the delta in price tag I think is definitely worth it. Can Lincoln beat Lexus and Acura? Ooh, that's an interesting question. I would say if it comes to SUVs and crossovers, then absolutely yes. I'm really, really interested to see what the new Lincoln products are going to be like, especially the Aviator. The Aviator, I think, is probably one of the most exciting products coming out in 2019. Not because, and this is going to sound strange, but not because of the car itself, in a way, but because it begs the question, is this the new direction for Lincoln? And I'm hoping the answer is yes. So if the Aviator is the start of a rear-wheel drive renaissance at Lincoln, that's very exciting, especially because it's a crossover. And we don't see that at Lexus or at Acura or at Cadillac, oddly enough. Cadillac has rear-wheel drive luxury sedans that I think compete well with the German competition in their segment. But Lincoln is the first one that's going to be giving us a rear-wheel drive crossover. And the XT6 is, I think, actually a little bit less exciting than I had hoped. It's not rear-wheel drive. It's not as powerful. It's actually more expensive than the Aviator. And when you compare Aviator to Lexus RX 350L, the GX, etc., the Aviator is likely, and I realize this is future prognosticating, but by its overall design, it is likely going to be much more dynamic than the GX, which is rear-wheel drive. It is surely going to be more dynamic than the RX or the MDX. It's going to be that interesting final American alternative to an X5, a GLE, an Audi Q7. I'm really interested to see what that's like. So if they can keep that up, if they can translate that into sedans and smaller crossovers, then I'm going to be very excited. Even if they can't, I'm interested in a way in the Nautilus and the upcoming Corsair, because Lincoln at least has the decency to march to a different drummer. And when we take a look at the Lexus NX, and to some extent in a way the Lexus the Acura RDX, those brands are definitely pursuing a European driving dynamic. The suspension is firm, they're targeting handling ability, they're targeting those sporty driving dynamics. You can see even, especially to Acura, there's this focus on sporty dynamics. And in a way, focusing on sporty dynamics and handling ability in a platform that is inherently compromised versus what we see in an Alfa Romeo Stelvio, for instance, ultimately I think is a defeating proposition in that sporty angle. But the Lincoln product line has gone in a different direction, and you could tell that with the Nautilus, especially in the top-end trims, they're focusing on customization, brand experience with the whole black label package thing, the customization that goes along with that, and definitely ride quality rather than handling ability. So the Nautilus floats like a boat. I mean, it is a whale out on the road. It's strangely enough not big nor heavy, but it feels big, it feels heavy. It has that same classic Lincoln drive that a classic Lincoln shopper might be looking for. It exists in the Nautilus, and oddly enough in the MKC come Corsair as well. So even if they don't go rear-wheel drive, I think there's still a market for that, because remember, the Lexus RX is actually the best-selling crossover in the luxury segment, period. It outsells the X5 and the GLE put together. And that classic Lexus shopper seems to be interested in something that is soft. So if Lincoln can somehow convince that shopper to look at the Nautilus, I think that they would actually find a product that would suit them very well. Marketing is a different question. But moving along, let's see here. What are your thoughts on the Duratec 3.5? No problems there. It seems to be a pretty reliable engine overall. Moving along here. Turbo, someone's agreeing here. Golf R or Honda Civic Type R, what would be better for reliability and long-term cost of ownership? Definitely Civic Type R. It's going to be more reliable from a variety of different reasons. But Volkswagen has generally not done terribly well in terms of reliability metrics compared to the Japanese brands. Actual difference, I'm not sure how big the difference would be between the two, but the Golf R specifically has some components that are unique to it, so they're going to be more expensive to replace. And the all-wheel drive system is going to lead to more expensive repairs long-term. So that'd be the big reason to avoid that if you're concerned about that long-term reliability metric. Now, if you're looking at fun, then I would say I might be convinced to Golf R because of the all-wheel drive system, and I really like that all-wheel drive feel. I have to say, however, that Honda really has worked some magic with the Type R, and there's very little torque steer for a front-wheel drive car. It's still there, but it's definitely minimalized. Moving along here. Another Golf R or Type R question, so hopefully I already replied about that. What do we think about the new Tesla? I'm assuming you're meaning the Model Y. The Model Y, I think, is the big question. Why was this not first? because it would have sold better, I think, than the Model 3. I will be interested in it when it actually comes out. I try not to get too interested in products that are a long ways out. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. Let's see here. Alex, the problem of Lincoln compared to Lexus is lease deals are much better. That's true. The one thing to keep in mind, however, is that there are actually some pretty good lease deals on Lincolns on the ground, depending on where you look. But Lincoln does seem to favor a customer set that is a little bit more interested in purchasing. That is a problem breaking into certain markets. But if we're looking at core product to core product, you will find lease deals that are comparable here and there. That's the big thing there. Let's see here, Rx350 Cons. So big pros, first off I should say, pros for the Rx350 would be reliability, brand experience. Generally Lexus dealers are lovely, to be perfectly frank. Best dealer experiences I've ever had have been at Jaguar and Lexus dealers, oddly enough. And the available hybrid system is definitely a strong pro for the RX model. Cons overall would be overall performance and overall pricing. You are going to get much better performance for the dollar in an alternative to the RX. Overall handling ability is not really where the RX is. And features, some of those more advanced luxury features you aren't going to find in the RX. Seat comfort is not going to be as high as a lot of the German options or the American options. For instance, for the price tag of the Lincoln Nautilus that we have this week, you could get an RX350 fully loaded, but you would be lacking the massaging seats, the inflatable side bolsters, the four-way adjustable lumbar support, just the overall seat shape and design is not going to be the same there. You're also going to be going 0 to 60 about a second and a half slower, which is a pretty big deal. It's those side things. So depending on what you're looking for, it can be a good deal. And the pros and cons generally end up being availability of features, the customization ability, etc. There are more color options inside the Lincoln Nautilus. Definitely more color options available inside something like a Bmw X5 or a GLE. I would say that the sideways comparison with the RX would be, on the other end, the RDX, which would actually be almost as reliable as the Lexus, but would handle better, give you better performance, be almost the same size on the inside, and give you some of those more modern features with its infotainment system. So that would be my, my takeaway there. For a first car, would you get a pickup or a sedan? I would say it depends on how experienced of a driver you are. If you're an experienced driver, I don't see any problems with a pickup. If you're just sort of learning how to drive, I would say sedan. The driving nature of a sedan is going to be a lot safer than a pickup truck. Pickup trucks have very light rear ends, so they're rear-wheel drive, but there's not a lot of weight back there. So as far as driving dynamics go, they're a little bit more challenging for young drivers to learn how to drive. In my personal opinion, I would probably never buy my kid a truck as their first car. I would probably buy my kid something safe that is a little bit better balanced weight-wise, etc., with all the latest safety systems, but that's just me. Can you provide behind-the-scenes video of how you conduct your performance testing? Unfortunately, no. We do all of our performance testing on a closed private road, and the owner of the private road has asked us never to film anything there, so that's why we don't film anything there. Let's see here. Santa Fe cons. The cons with the Santa Fe, I would say, would be the active safety systems that are not standard, that are optional on that versus some of the alternatives. Overall performance levels in the top end trims, it's not going to be as fast as the Edge SE, ST. I think that the looks are a little bit personal taste would be the best way to say that. The headlights that are divorced from the daytime running lights up top, not my favorite look. But I do think that the interior is a pretty big pro on that one, and the overall pricing is pretty good as well. Let's see here. We're dialing into the end of our episode here, but I think we'll try and move along as quickly as possible. Do we think Mitsubishi will outsell Mazda with the help of Nissan? Not anytime soon. Someone's considering between a used GSF or BMW M3. Both are 2016s. If you're looking for a sporty daily driver and you want reliability, GSF is definitely going to be more reliable than M3, but not quite as much fun. Great engine noise though. Hyundai Palisade, how long before we get our hands on one? That we already know. It's going to be in June. It's when the launch event's going to be. They will be on sale probably June or July, so definitely after the Telluride. Could we demonstrate some of the commonly used safety tech like adaptive cruise control or lane keep in separate videos? Let's think about that. We might be able to do that. ZR2 versus Gladiator. Gladiator is actually a good buy versus ZR2, I think. I would probably Gladiator, depending on what you're after. ZR2 is more traditional truck. Gladiator is definitely more Jeepy. So on-road dynamics, I think in ZR2 is a little bit better. Off-road ability in Gladiator does appear to be better. Diesel engine available right away in Chevy, later in the Gladiator. Nissan Titan getting a twin-turbo V6. I'll believe that when I see it. Telluride better buy than the Highlander, definitely. Should I get a 2003 Lexus SC430 with 110,000 miles? Oh my, that's a lot of miles. I don't know if I would do that. Do you like the Lamborghini SUV? I like it. Not really a huge Lamborghini fan, which is odd. I'm not a huge supercar fan, to be honest, so Lamborghinis, Ferraris, etc. just not a thing for me. Let's see here. Which would you pick and why? Ford Explorer or Highlander? I would probably Explorer because it has a huge cargo area and there are more engines available, but Highlander is very reliable. So depending on whether you're after features or reliability, Highlander, features Ford. Thoughts on buying first generation Telluride? I wouldn't have any problems with that. Actually, Kia and Hyundai have had a pretty good reputation for reliability. Again, as we said earlier, it's been improving, and that has included first-generation products, so no issues there. Vintage car, would you take over a new one? I would take a 1942 Rolls-Royce Phantom 3 over a new one, but that's probably about it. New BMW X5 review is coming in about 4 or 5 weeks. Have we seen the new 2020 Sonata? I have, and I actually like the look, which is surprising because initially I was wondering how the look on the Elantra, which I'm not a huge fan of, would translate to the Sonata, but I actually like the look. I realize that it's polarizing, however, so let me know what you think over on Facebook, probably. Anyway, future EV resale values, probably poor. Other than Tesla, Tesla seems to be holding the resale values well, but other than that, EVs don't seem to be doing well there. Nissan Armada getting a refresh soon. Don't bet on it. That is definitely an old product, and we haven't seen anything. Jaguar XE versus Alfa Giulia TI. I like the Alfa as far as driving dynamics, but the Jaguar is probably going to be more reliable. Its infotainment systems are also more modern, and we will be seeing a new Jaguar XE in New York very, very soon. Forester or Tiguan. Base Forester, yes. Upper level Forester, no. Base Tiguan, probably not, but I would probably get the upper level Tiguan, and I like the available third row. Thoughts testing audio system. I think it's too subjective, and that's why we don't talk about it too much. I like what I like, some people like what they like, and that's why we don't talk on it too much. Certified Mercedes-Benz CLA, is that a good buy? Maybe, but I would probably Audi A3 before I CLA'd. Any news on the Volkswagen ID hatch? It's going to be a long way off, and they have said that we don't know whether we'll get it in the US, but they have said possibly not. Durango third row versus 2020 Explorer. Too early to tell, but anecdotally, I think that the Explorer will be a little bit bigger back there. Well-equipped used Accord, 2019 well-equipped Accord, or used 2018 Volvo S90 low mileage? Ooh, tricky one. Probably S90. Maxima or Avalon, I would say neither. I would Accord. G70 or Stinger, I would Stinger. And with that, I will say goodbye, because we are now past our 4 o'clock deadline, so I will see you all later, if we can hit the button here.